إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So today is our second lesson on the benefits taken from the book Madarij al-Salikin of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah. So since it's been a while since we had the last lesson, I want to spend maybe the first 5 or so minutes just to recap that initial lesson. So that was more or less a history lesson and putting this book into context. And we said that Madarij al-Salikin is really a commentary upon a book by a Shaykh al-Islam who came some centuries earlier in the 5th century Hijrah, and that is Abu Ismail al-Harawi. And he was born and raised in the east, in Khorasan, or the region today known as Afghanistan. And we described the circumstances in which Abu Ismail al-Harawi was born and raised. And so we said that in that time period, in the time period of the Abbasid Caliphate, in Baghdad, there was Al-Qadiru Billah, who was the Khalifa. And on the east, there was Mahmud bin Sabuqtaqin. And he was known as Yameenud Dawlah. Yameenud Dawlah. He's the right-hand man of the state. The right-hand man of the state. And there were two things that characterized that period of time in which Abu Ismail was born and raised and acquired knowledge. One of those was the flourishing of knowledge, and the sciences, the Islamic sciences, first of all. And secondly, it was the fact that both Mahmud, Yamin al-Dawla, and Al-Qadiru Billah were extremely staunch and severe upon the Sunnah, and they had a very harsh position towards the people of Bid'ah. And we gave examples in the previous lesson of that, to such a degree, as we said, that the people of Bid'ah, and in particular the Ash'aris, not just the Ash'aris but in general others, that they had to hide and conceal themselves. They were that fearful of the people of the Sunnah and the authorities that they would not tolerate any deviation from the Sunnah. They used to read a particular book every week, every Jum'ah, which continued for decades of rule. So this was the general situation. And as you know, Abu Ismail al-Harawi, when the ruler Mahmud, when he passed away and that protection went, he was then put to trial in his religion, meaning the Mubtadi'ah. You know the well-known narration, عُرِضَتْ عَلِيَّ السَّيْفِ خَمْسَ مَرَّاتٍ, that the sword was put to me 5 times. And he said that لا يقال لي ارجع عن مذهبك. It wasn't said to me, abandon your madhab, but it was said to me, اسكت عمن خالفك. Stop speaking, be quiet about those who oppose you. So they put him to trial many times, and then after those trials, towards the end of his life, he entered into something of the kalam and the speech that is found with the Sufis, speaking about tasawwuf. And he wrote this book, Manazil al-Sa'irin. And after him, many of the Sufis, they try to make ascription to him or use him in order to justify their particular falsehood. However, as you know, that these types of things that the Sufis entered into were, many of them were philosophical issues, many terms whose realities, were confusing. Al-Haqiqa, Wal-Shari'a, Al-Fana, Al-Ittihad, and so on and so forth, Al-Kashf, Al-Wujdan, all these different terminologies, there can be haqq and batil. And so the Shaykh entered into this and he wrote in this field, and because of the obscurity, the Sufis, they used his works to justify what they were upon. So fast forward 3 centuries afterwards, 3-4 centuries afterwards, the time of Ibn al-Qayyim, and Ibn al-Qayyim saw it fit that given that Abu Ismail al-Harawi is a Shaykh al-Islam who aided the Sunnah, was put to trial by the Mubtadi'ah, and had juhud, had made jihad and had juhud. And he, in fact, I forgot to mention, he also authored the book Dhammul Kalam. Dhammul Kalam wa Ahli, tremendous book, nothing like it, on the censor of the people of Kalam. In there he has harsh speech, even to the degree he makes takfir of the Ash'aris, and he cites takfir of the Ash'aris. And there were some reasons for that, why some of the scholars said that, is because of some specific doctrines that they had, which necessitated the necessity which was that the Messenger of Allah is no longer a messenger after his death. Right? They had the principle, al-arad la yabqa zamanain, and connected to the sifat of Allah. And from the implications of this is that the attribute of messengership expires after the passing away of the Messenger of Allah. So because of that, some of the scholars, they made takfir of them, even though the Ash'ari say that we don't say this, we don't hold this belief. But it's necessitated from the principles that they invented in order to defend and prop up the devious madhab in the issue of the sifat. So to such an extent that even it is related that Mahmud, the leader Mahmud bin Sabuktakin, that he had Ibn Fawrak killed by poisoning, because this statement was ascribed to him, or was the necessity of his saying, or it was narrated from him that he said that the messenger is the messenger of Allah then, but as for now, then no. And so because of that qawl, it is said that he had him poisoned. In any case, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he wrote this book, Madarij al-Salikin, and in this book, his intent and his objective is to purify all of these ideas with the Sufis and to present them from the point of view of the Quran and the Sunnah and the statements of the Salaf, and also to anchor them to the right beliefs. Right? Because we know with the Sufis, if you look at the Sufis, they have with them deviation in the sifat, they have with them deviation in al-qadar, because they are inclined towards jabr, right? They're upon jabr. Likewise, in the issue, they also have, in the issue of like wahdatul wujud, they believe in ittihad, and all these ideas which deviate from the right belief. So Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he is bringing what they call tasawwuf, which to us is tazkiyatun nafs, and then he's anchoring it into the right beliefs in the sifat, in al-qadr, in iman, and so on and so forth. And then he is clarifying as he goes along, he's clarifying many of their misconceptions, many of the terminology that they use, and to make sure that what Abu Ismail al-Harawi, what he wrote, by and large, is that he intended the truth and he was desiring the truth. And he may have fallen into some errors here and there, and some vague speech and some errors. So he's correcting that in order to, in a way, to defend an Imam of the Sunnah, and to protect him and to rectify his errors and to give him a good standing. And it's because of this book, Madarij al-Salikin, the tremendous benefit in this book, that we can see the important task that Ibn al-Qayyim did, rahimahullah, in aiding the cause of a Shaykh al-Islam who preceded him many centuries earlier. So what we're going to do, inshallah, with that brief recap of the previous lesson is we'll make a start today, inshallah ta'ala. Basically, the book, there is a muqaddimah, a short muqaddimah, and then the next 150 pages, depending on which print you look at, is looking at what are the most lofty objectives which are presented in Surah Al-Fātiḥah. In Surah Al-Fātiḥah. This 150 pages is extremely beneficial. Extremely beneficial. Keeping in mind that Al-Fātiḥah is the opening to the Quran. It is the essence of the Quran. And what Ibn al-Qayyim does in these 150 pages, it would take a while to go through all the issues, but just to briefly summarize, he says how Al-Fātiḥah comprises establishment of knowledge of Allah, knowledge of the resurrection, knowledge of the prophethood. Then he goes and speaks about actual guidance itself and the levels of guidance and the types of guidance. Then he speaks about principles of the names and attributes, which are all contained within the chapter, within Al-Fātiḥah. After that, he goes on to mention how Al-Fātiḥah comprises a refutation of every false religion and every group of innovation. Right? So he breaks it down that either you are a believer in a creator or not. So if you're an atheist, then this is how Al-Fātiḥah refutes you. And if you are a believer in Allah, then either you are from the people of Tawheed or you're from the people of Shirk. And if you're from the people of Shirk, then this is the refutation of you. And if you are from the people of innovation, then he mentions different types of innovators. There are the people of Qadar, there are the Rafidah, there are the people who believe, for example, the universe is eternal. Then there are the philosophers, then there are the people who negate Allah's speech, and other groups as well. And so he dedicates sections to each party, each group, and shows how it is a refutation of them. Then he speaks about al-ibadah wal-isti'anah, right, which is worship and seeking aid with Allah. And the different categories of people in respect to where they stand in combining these two things. Right? Some people just worship without isti'anah. Right? Other people make isti'anah but without any worship. Right? They seek aid from Allah in the worldly things but neglect the worship. Right? So he goes into all the different categories, and then so as you can see, there is a lot in this initial 150 pages as it relates to what is in Al-Fātiḥah. It is of tremendous benefit to read in its original. We are using a taqrib, which means many things are omitted. But just to give you an idea of what's there, so you can go back and read the original in your own time, inshallah ta'ala. So then after that, the third section, which is the rest of the book, is he mentions the individual manazil, or the madarij, the steps, the levels. So he mentions things like al-basira, which is having insight, right? So we start with al-basira. Then al-qasd meaning a person's intent. What is the al-qasd? And how do you correct it? How do you rectify it? Then al-azam, which is firm resolution. How do you develop a firm resolution, determination, that you have zeal, azam for things? How do you correct that part of yourself? Likewise, at-tawbah, al-muhasabah, calling yourself to account, al-inaba, turning back to Allah, and so on and so forth, at-tawakkul. So as you can see, there are many important things here. And within al-madarij also are many things to do with the soul and the diseases of the soul. And often I refer people back to this book and parts of this book when it comes to what we have, like in a modern sense, many people speak about psychological issues, whisperings, or they speak about self-development. You see a lot of the disbelievers speaking about, spiritual things, right? And it's all polluted with philosophy, and so there's a lot of speech amongst the people of the earth, and even Muslims are affected by some of these things about how do you, get self-determination, how do you develop the soul, how do you this, how do you that, whatever. You will find all of that in this book, Madarij, and the cure to your ailments of a psychological nature, of in the soul, that does away with all of the falsehood that is with whether the Sufis, whether the non-Muslims who speak about these issues, like amongst the disbelievers, you have these new age types of people, and they speak about manifestation, and they speak about this, whatever. It's all batil, founded upon batil. But you see Muslims getting drawn into those types of things because they are seeking guidance from other than what Allah revealed. In this book, Al-Madarij, you will see many of these things of the soul, of intention, of strengthening one's resolution, one's fortitude, all these things you will find in this book. So it's a tremendous book. There's so much in there. Because we're using a taqreeb, which is a condensed version, you will miss many of the benefits which is in the original. And especially because the people who have made these condensed versions, their goal was to leave only that which relates to the correction of the soul. And as for all the other issues, maybe to do with creed or maybe to do with other issues, then they've minimized them as much as possible, which means that you will lose a lot of the benefit which is in the original, which is why I recommend, if you can read in Arabic, I strongly encourage you to go back to this, the original. And if you don't have the time for the whole thing, at least study the first section on Al-Fātiḥah. It's about 100, 110, 150 pages, depending on which print. You will find tremendous benefit just from that section alone, because it covers so many of the foundations of the religion. So having said that, let's begin, inshallah ta'ala, with the Muqaddimah of Ibn al-Qayyim. It's a lengthy Muqaddimah. I'll summarize the first part of it. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he begins by praising Allah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wal aqibatu lil muttaqeen, wala udwana illa ala al-zalimin. With his Muqaddimah, he mentions the book of Allah, Al-Kitabul Mubin, and how it is that which separates between guidance and misguidance. Al-Ghay wal-Rashad, again, which is error and guidance. Wash-Shak wal-Yaqeen, that which is doubt and that which is certainty. He mentions how Allah revealed this book so that we read it in order to reflect. It is a book for reflection, and that we may reflect upon it to gain basira, tabassur, that we reflect, that we gain basira, and that we make tadhakkur, that we seek a reminder and an admonition from it. He also explains that this book directs a person who seeks knowledge and acquaintance with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it leads a person to the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which illuminates him in the darkness, and it leads him to the mercy of Allah, which guides a person to rectification, and it leads him to the straight path. It's a straight path which is unstained by the opinions of men. Right? The straight path which is unstained by the opinions of men. And it is the wise remembrance which is unaffected by the desires of the people. Within it, there is no conflict or contradiction. It is something that the scholars are never satiated from this book. And then he continues giving these types of descriptions to the Quran, that its benefits, its ayat, they never expire, they are never exhausted, and it is like clouds which never cease giving the rain. So he goes on to describe these types of descriptions of the Quran. And in the next part of it, after establishing that this is what the Quran is, and this is what is the purpose behind the Quran, then he says that if there are unclean hearts, and if they are poisoned by the opinions of men and the desires of men, then all of these doors to benefiting from the Quran will be closed. And what he's alluding to here is he is alluding to a historical reality, which is that after the time of the companions, when these opinions began to appear from the men and the desires began to appear from the men, meaning the firaq and the statements of deviation, whether it is the Khawarij or the Rafida or the Qadariyah, the Murji'ah, the negators of the Sifat, and all those other people, and the opinions began, right? This is when the guidance of the Quran was lost. And because of the absence of the hearts being pure and clean, unlike that of the Sahaba, then the effect of the Quran, because there were stains on the people's hearts become stained, then the Quran no longer, the people were prevented. They were prevented because in effect they turned away from the Quran because of these opinions, desires, which put a stain on the hearts of the people. And then because of that, they lost the life which ordinarily speaking the hearts would have received from the Quran. Why? Because they have ara, they have afkar, they have ahwa. And so this is the sad state of affairs which came to be after the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So he's lamenting that this is what happened. And so in that context, in the next part of the Muqaddimah, he's explaining how does a person attain perfection, right? How does he attain perfection through this guidance? And this is the part that we are going to read, inshallah, where he says, وَبَعَدْ فَلَمَّا كَانَ كَمَالُ الْإِنسَانِ إِنَّمَا هُوَ بِالْعِلْمِ النَّافِعِ وَالْعَمَلِ الصَّالِحِ وَهُمَا الْهُدَى وَدِينُ الْحَقِّ. So he says, when it is the case that the perfection of man lies in the beneficial knowledge and the righteous action. The beneficial knowledge and the righteous action. And they are guidance and the true religion. So guidance is the knowledge, al-ilm al-nafi'. And the true religion is al-amal al-salih, which means the halal and the haram and what Allah obligated, right? The legislations, the shara'i, the legislations. So this is huda, which is knowledge, and dinul haqq. So the perfection of a man lies in these two things. This is inherently beneficial knowledge, and this is what we have. There's no other knowledge which is inherently beneficial. Then he says a third thing, وَبِتَكْمِيلِهِ لِغَيْرِهِ فِي هَذَيْنِ الْأَمْرَيْنِ. So there's another part to perfection, which is part of it, which is that you then also complete and perfect other people with these two things. And then he says the evidence for this is the statement of Allah Ta'ala, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Indeed, mankind is in loss except those who believe and do righteous deeds and mutually enjoin the truth and mutually enjoin patience. So here he says that Allah swore that everyone is in ruin and loss except إِلَّا مَنْ كَمَّلَ قُوَّتَهُ الْعِلْمِيَّ بِالْإِيمَانِ. Except who? The one who perfected the knowledge-based strength through iman. Right? So man has a quwwah ilmiyah. We have the ability to know, we have strength in knowledge. So how do you perfect that knowledge ability, it is by way of Iman, believing in Iman and the foundations of Iman and what Allah revealed. And likewise, وَقُوَّتَهُ الْعَمَلِيَّةِ بِالْعَمَلِ الصَّالِحِ. And likewise, he strengthens his capacity for action by way of righteous action. And then وَكَمَّلَ غَيْرَهُ بِالْوَصِيَّةِ بِالْحَقِّ وَالصَّبْرِ عَلَيْهِ. And then he perfects other than himself, right? So his family, his spouse, his children, his brothers, his relatives, and so on and so forth. He perfects them also by way of these two, and he does so by enjoining the truth and having patience upon it. So then he says, فَالْحَقُّ هُوَ الْإِيمَانُ وَالْعَمَلُ وَلَا يَتِمُّ إِلَّا بِالصَّبْرِ عَلَيْهِ وَالتَّوَاصِي بِهِ. So the truth is Iman and action, and it cannot be perfected except by way of having patience upon it and enjoining it upon other people. So he who does that, right? So he says that given these three things without which a person cannot be perfected, it is beneficial knowledge, righteous action, and then teaching other people the same. Given this reality, then he says that كان حقيقا بالإنسان أن ينفق ساعة عمره بل أنفاسه فيما ينال به المطالب العالية. So given this fact that no one can reach perfection except by way of these three things, then it is worthy of man that he spends all of his hours of his life, rather the individual moments, in that by which the loftiest objectives, the loftiest pursuits can be acquired. Right? So what are these matalib aliyah? Al-matalib al-aliyah. The loftiest pursuits. This is what he should be seeking. He says that, then he goes on to say, وليس ذلك إلا بالإقبال على القرآن وتفهمه وتدبره واستخراج كنوزه وإثارة دفائنه والصرف العناية إليه. So he says this can only happen by way of turning to the Quran, gaining understanding of it, reflecting upon it, bringing out its treasures, bringing out what is hidden of its treasures, turning one's attention to it completely. And why? Because this فَإِنَّهُ الْكَفِيلُ بِمَصَالِحِ الْعِبَادِ فِي الْمَعَاشِ وَالْمَعَادِ. Because this Quran has guaranteed all of the beneficial interests in the life of this world and in the hereafter. And it is what makes a person reach the path of guidance. Then he says, and he mentions four terms. He says, فَالْحَقِيقَةِ وَالطَّرِيقَةِ والأذواق والمواجيد الصحيحة كلها لا تقتبس إلا من مشكاته ولا تستثمر إلا من شجراته. So he says, he mentioned these four terms, the haqiqah and the tariqah and the dhawaq, al-adhwaq and the mawajid. What do these four terms mean? These are four terms of the Sufis. Right? The Sufis, you hear them, they say al-haqiqah. And what do they mean by this? They mean something specific by this, upon their doctrine. And likewise, at-tariqah. Al-haqiqah means the reality of knowing Allah, His names, His attributes, meaning that He is one. And that He is one with the creation, that there's only one existence. That's what they mean. What tariqah? And by tariqah they mean like the path that they have other than the path of the prophets. It is the path, as they claim, to spiritual guidance, to reaching Allah, but through their awliya. That's what they mean by tariqah. It's other than what the prophets and messengers came with. Then they say, wal adhwaq, dhawq. Right? What do they mean, dhawq? By dhawq they mean, this is like a type of, they believe that a person can gain knowledge by way of the intellectual taste, right? You have an ability, and you have an intuition. It's called intuition. And through this intuition, you can acquire knowledge from Allah or from Allah. Right? So this is their route to knowledge, as opposed to we taking it from revelation. And likewise, they say al-mawajid, al-wajd or al-wujdan. This is now what they call like the feelings of pleasure and joy and ecstasy when you worship. Right? So this is what the Sufis claim. Right? That we know the haqiqah, we know the reality that the common people don't know. We have a tariqah, we have a path by which we reach Allah to Him directly. We don't need the prophets and messengers because they are just for the common people. We are the elite people because we understand higher philosophical truths, the haqiqah. So we have our own tariqah, and we have means of acquiring knowledge directly, which is through dhawq, right? Which is like a type of intuition, right? Feeling intuition. And we do it by exercising and training ourselves with types of worship by which we get this kashf or this dhawq. And we also have this wajd or this mawajid, which means like the ecstasy that you feel, you know, like the pleasure that in the worship and or the innovative type of worship. When they sit in rooms and they breathe and then they get this ecstasy, as they claim, and they feel they've connected with Allah. So this is how the Sufis, when they gained prominence and they sucked in the common people, making them think that this is the religion. This is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you have to go through the awliya and you have to, So Ibn al-Qayyim is saying that these affairs, what is called al-haqiqah and al-tariqah and al-adwaq and al-mawajid al-sahihah, all of these are not taken except from the light of revelation. And the fruits can only be taken from the trees of revelation. Right? So meaning that this in a way explains the intent of Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah in this book. He's making it clear here. He's saying, in effect, that in what follows in this book, we are going to explain these affairs, the haqiqah, the tariqah, the al-adwaq and all these affairs, but in the correct way upon revelation, with the right understanding. So then he goes on to say, وَنَحْنُ بِعَوْنِ اللَّهِ ننبه على هذا بالكلام على فاتحة الكتاب وأم القرآن. So he says, we, by the aid of Allah, will allude to these things by speaking about the opening of the book, the mother of the Quran, the Quran, the essence of the Quran, and what it contains of these affairs, of these matalib, of these lofty pursuits, and what it contains of the ranks and the levels of those who travel to Allah, and the various stations of the arifin, those who have ilm, have knowledge. وَالْفَرْقْ بَيْنَ وَسَائِلِهَا وَغَايَاتِهَا وَمَوَاهِبِهَا وَكَسْبِيَاتِهَا. And I will explain the difference between the goals and the means, like the means and the ends, and the gifts that it contains, and the acquired knowledge that we take from it. وبيان أنه لا يقوم غير هذه السورة مقامها ولا يصد مصدها ولذلك لم ينزل الله في التوراة ولا في الإنجيل ولا في القرآن مثلها. For this reason we find that Allah did not reveal in the Torah, nor the Injil, nor the Quran the likes of this surah, because there is nothing that can take its place. Wallahu al-musta'an wa alayhi tuqalan wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-ali al-azim. And so from Allah's aid sought, and upon Him is trust placed, and there is no power nor might except by Allah the Mighty. So then he begins, so this is the muqaddimah. So he's laid out in the muqaddimah what the objective of the book effectively is, which is that if you as a person cannot attain perfection except with beneficial knowledge and righteous action, and then completing others besides you with the same two things, and having patience upon that, then it is worthy upon you to turn to the Quran, to reflect to find and to extract its treasures and so on and so forth. And through that, you come to the correct understandings of what is found with the people or what they claim, the people misguidance, the Sufis, of these words that they use, the haqiqah, the tariqah, the adwaq, and the mawajid. And so he will do this how? By pointing out to us some of the ummahat al-matalib which are found in Surah Al-Fātiḥah. Right, so he now is going to begin looking at Surah Al-Fātiḥah, and so the next section, Bayan Ishtimal Al-Fātiḥah ala ummahat al-matalib. An explanation of how Al-Fātiḥah comprises the loftiest objectives. So the loftiest of objectives in our religion, all of them are comprised within Al-Fātiḥah. So he now begins. So he says, first of all, اعلم أن هذه السورة اشتملت على أمهات المطالب العالية أتم اشتمال وتضمنتها أكمل تضمن. Know that this surah comprises all of the foundational lofty objectives or lofty pursuits in the most complete of ways, in the most perfect of ways, and they contain them in the most perfect of ways. So then he mentions the first thing, فاشتملت على التعريف بالمعبود تبارك وتعالى بثلاثة أسماء مرجع الأسماء الحسنى والصفات العليا إليها ومدارها عليها. So what is the first lofty objective that this Al-Fātiḥah contains? He says it contains acquaintance with Al-Ma'bud, Tabarak wa Ta'ala, with Allah, the deity who is worshipped, Tabarak wa Ta'ala. And it does so by way of three names. All of the beautiful names of Allah and the lofty attributes return back to these three names. And they revolve around these three names, which is why these three names have come first in Al-Fātiḥah. And what are they? وَهِيَ Allah, وَهِيَ اللَّهُ وَالرَّبُّ وَالرَّحْمَنُ. So the first three names which occur in Al-Fātiḥah is Allah, وَالرَّبُّ وَالرَّحْمَنُ. And from these three, all of the other names and attributes return back to these three and revolve around them. So he says, وَبُنِيَتِ السُّورَةُ عَلَى الْإِلَهِيَّةِ وَالرُّبُوبِيَّةِ وَالرَّحْمَةِ. So this surah is built upon what? Upon ilahiyya, Allah's right to be worshipped alone, that He being worthy of worship. وَالرُّبُوبِيَّةِ, which is His lordship. وَالرَّحْمَةِ, and His mercy. So he says, فَإِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ مَبْنِيٌّ عَلَى الْإِلَهِيَّةِ. So when we say إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ, why do we say that statement? It is because it is founded upon Allah being worthy of worship. He alone being worthy of worship. And when we say وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, from you alone do we seek aid, what is that statement built upon? It is built upon the fact that Allah alone is the Rabb. It is built upon ala al-rububiyyah. And وَطَلَبَ الْحِدَايَةِ إِلَى صِرَاطِهِ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ بِصِفَةِ الرَّحْمَةِ. And then when we say after that, اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ, guide us to the straight path, what is that statement founded upon? It is founded upon the attribute of mercy, because it implies Allah indeed gave guidance to mankind by the sending of books and messengers. So that talab, that request of guidance, is founded upon rahmah. So إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ is founded upon uluhiyyah, إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ is founded upon rububiyyah, and إِهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ is founded upon rahmah. Then he says, وَالْحَمْدِ يَتَضَمَّنْ الْأُمُورَ الثَّلَاثَةِ. Right. So alhamd, which we say at the beginning, alhamdulillah, Just that alhamd, Allah being praised, that itself comprises all three things. So alhamd comprises ilahiyya and rububiyyah and rahmah, meaning Allah is praised for His ilahiyya and praised for His rububiyyah and praised for His rahmah. And He says, وَالثَّنَاء وَالْمَجْدِ كَمَالًا لِحَمْدِهِ. So this is the first thing that is comprised in Al-Fātiḥah. It is being acquainted with our Lord with three names that are the foundation to which all other names and attributes return back to, and which the other requests that are made or statements which are made in the surah, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ, they are founded upon each of these three names or these three qualities: ilahiyya, rububiyyah, and rahmah. And alhamd at the beginning comprises all of those things. He's praised in His ilahiyya, rububiyyah, and rahmah. So this is the first thing, immediate thing that we acquire from Surah Al-Fātiḥah. Knowledge of the Lord Most High. And that's like the opening into the rest of the Quran. The second thing he says, وَتَضَمَّنَتْ إِثْبَاتَ الْمَعَادِ وجزاء العباد بأعمالهم حسنها وسيئها وتفرد الرب تعالى بالحكم إذ ذاك بين الخلائق وكون حكمه بالعدل وكل هذا تحت قوله مالك يوم الدين. The second of the المطالب العالية or أمهات المطالب, the second of the loftiest, noblest, highest types of pursuits that any man can pursue, that this surah contains, is affirmation of al-ma'ad, the resurrection, and recompensing the servants for their actions, both their good and their evil. And the fact that Allah, the Rabb, the Exalted, is singled out. He is the only one who will make the judgment between all of the creation. There is no one else, right? So there's no Jesus, there's no the Prophet, no the like what the Christians say, that Jesus will judge and no, it's just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is singled out with the judgment between all His creation, and the fact that His judgment is with adl, with justice. And all of this comes under His statement, Maliki Yawmiddin. Maliki Yawmiddin. So this now is the second matlab, the second lofty pursuit. It is the resurrection and the recompense for the deeds, and the fact that that will be by way of adl, justice, perfect justice, and the fact that it is only Allah who will be the sole judge in that respect. The third matlab, the third lofty pursuit that the Surah Al-Fātiḥah establishes is, he says, وَتَضَمَّنَتْ إِثْبَاتَ النُّبُوَّاتِ مِنْ جِهَاتٍ عَدِيدَةٍ. Likewise, Al-Fātiḥah comprises the affirmation of prophethood. Right? Prophethood as a fact and a reality is established in Al-Fātiḥah, but from many different angles, and he will mention 8 different angles. Now here, this is a refutation of those, that group of people that are known as the deists. As you know, there are the atheists, right? So atheists disbelieve in a creator and a maker. And then there are the agnostics, and the agnostics are basically people who are confused, people who have shak, they have doubt, right? So if you're agnostic, you say, I don't know if there's a creator, or if there isn't a creator. This person has shak. He's upon jahl. Shak includes jahl. And so this is a person who has no knowledge, is confused. Whereas the atheist is the one who's making a claim that there is no creator, there is no maker. But then there's another category of person, which is the deist. And the deist is the one who says, so the deist he's not as foolish and stupid as the atheist, because the atheist is really a fool. He's deceiving himself. This person knows that the evidence for a creator is compelling. It is compelling, right? Either he knows it from his fitrah, or he knows it just by way of the ayat of Allah that he sees, that he knows, whether at the general, cosmic level, or at the very specific detail level. He knows that this definitely is not the work of accident and chance. There's something behind this. But then he says that this creator, once he created the creation, he forgot his creation and had nothing to do with it, did not communicate with it, is not concerned with its affairs. And the reason why these people stop at this belief in a creator is because they dislike what they call organized religion. They call it organized religion, because they believe that organized religion is the source of all evil upon the earth, and bloodshed and tribulation and whatever. So they don't believe in the notion of what they call organized religion, which means therefore no revealed books, no sent messengers, and therefore no religion by which the affairs of mankind are put aright. Now, this statement of the deists is one of the most evil, vile types of statements, right? In some ways, it's even worse than this. Even though disbelieving in a creator is clearly, obviously, it's worse because you deny the creator. But the implications of what they are saying, that this creator just left his creation, didn't send messengers, didn't reveal books, didn't guide them, is not concerned, he doesn't govern his creation, he doesn't guide, misguide, send down the rain. No, this is complete and utter, this is misguidance for them to say this. Now, these people, as we said, they reject revealed books and they reject the sent messengers. And so the next part, the fact that Surah Al-Fātiḥah establishes the nubuwat, the sending of the messengers, or the prophethood, like in principle, then this is a refutation of these people. And it's a refutation of other people as well. So he goes on to mention some of the angles. So he says, أحدها كونه رب العالمين فلا يليق به أن يترك عباده سدى حملا لا يعرفهم ما ينفعهم في معاشهم ومعادهم وما يضرهم فيهما فهذا حدم للربوبية والنسبة إلى الرب تعالى ما لا يليق به وما قدره حق قدره من نسبه إليه. He says the first evidence for prophethood is the fact that he is Rabbul Alameen. So when Allah Azza wa Jal said, Alhamdulillahi, Rabbil Alameen, him being Rabbil Alameen, that is a first evidence or a first proof to show that he would never leave his servants neglected without purpose, without informing them, without telling them what will benefit them in this life and the next, and what will harm them in this life and the next. Otherwise, this claim, if you claim that Allah sent no books, Allah sent no messengers, then you are negating, you are invalidating rububiyyah. Because it's necessitated by him being Rabbul Alameen, the fact that he's the Rabb. So if you affirm a Rabb, by necessity you have to affirm that he would never neglect his servants without telling them, this will benefit you, this will harm you, this will enter you into bliss, and this will enter you into punishment. Right? So the fact that Allah is Rabbul Alameen, this is the first sign or the first proof for prophethood in Al-Fātiḥah. So Allah being Rabbul Alameen is the first evidence in Al-Fātiḥah for the prophethood. The second evidence is taken from the name Allah, because Allah huwa al-ma'luh al-ma'bud, What does Allah mean? Allah means al-ma'luh al-ma'bud, the one who is worshipped, who is given worship, who is adored, who is revered. ولا سبيل للعباد إلى معرفة عبوديته إلا من طريق رسله. Right? So since Allah is al-ma'luh al-ma'bud, the one who is given worship and devotion and reverence and so on and so forth, then how are the servants supposed to know how to worship Him except through the route of the books and the messengers or His messengers? So by necessity, the name Allah necessitates the sending of messengers. Right? So this now is a second angle. Him being Rabb and Him being Allah necessitates the sending of messengers. The third, الموضع الثالث من اسمه الرحمن الذي رحمته تمنع إهمال عباده وعدم تعريفهم ما ينالون به غاية كمالهم. So he says the third place in Al-Fātiḥah, which is a proof for the sending of messengers and prophethood, is the name Ar-Rahman. Because Allah is the most merciful, then this prevents the neglect of His servants and the absence of informing them that by which will lead them to their perfection. So whoever gave the name Ar-Rahman its true right, he will know that Ar-Rahman necessitates the sending of messengers and the revealing of books more than it necessitates the sending of rain and the bringing about of vegetation. Right? In other words, when we speak of Allah's mercy, then Allah's mercy necessitates that He sends books and messengers that gives life to the hearts more than it necessitates sending the rain and bringing the vegetation, which only gives life to the bodies. Right? That gives life to the bodies, but that gives life to the hearts. So he says, فَاقْتِدَاءُ الرَّحْمَةِ لِمَا يَحْصُلُ بِهِ حَيَاةَ الْقُلُوبِ وَالْأَرْوَاحِ أَعْظَمُ مِنْ اقْتِدَائِهَا لِمَا يَحْصُلُ بِهِ حَيَاةَ الْأَبْدَانِ وَالْأَشْبَاحِ. So he says that Allah's mercy necessitating that by which the hearts and the souls gain life is greater than it necessitating that by which the bodies gain life. However, he says, لكن المحجوبون إنما أدركوا من هذا الاسم حظ البهائم والدواب وأدرك منه أولو الألباب أمرا وراء ذلك. So then he says that there are some people who are veiled from truly understanding this knowledge of this name. Right? When they hear Ar-Rahman, they think Ar-Rahman means Allah gave us rain, Allah gave us vegetation, Allah gave us animals, Allah gave us trees, Allah gave us winds. So their notion of Allah being merciful, the first thing that comes to their mind is, look at what Allah gave to me, the body, the breathing, enjoying food, rain, spouses, enjoyment. This is what he understands to be Allah's mercy. But these types of people are the mahjubun. They are veiled from having truly understood what the name Ar-Rahman, what it truly necessitates. And their understanding, he says, حَظُّ الْبَهَائِمِ وَالدَّوَابِ. Like this is the knowledge of the animals. This is what is with the animals. It's the animals who see that like in terms of the fitrah and that their Lord gave them food, drink. This is what the animal thinks. Why? Because the animal's instinct is, where do I get my next meal, and where do I get my next drink, and how do I satisfy my desire? That's generally the concern of animals, because they have no aql like the aql of men, and they're not sent revelation. So whoever understood Ar-Rahman to mean this, then he is from the mahjubun, whose understanding is like the understanding of the animals and the beasts. Whereas to the people, the ulul albab, they see beyond that meaning, And what they see is from Ar-Rahman is the sending of messengers and the revealing of books. Al-Mawdi' al-Rabi', the fourth place where there is an evidence for the sending of messengers and the prophethood, min dhikri yawmiddin, is from the mentioning of yawmiddin, which is the day of judgment. So he says, فَإِنَّهُ الْيَوْمَ الَّذِي, this is the day in which Allah will judge the servants by their actions. He will reward them for the good deeds and will punish them for the evil deeds and for the sins. And Allah would never punish anybody before establishing the proof. وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. Right? Never are we to punish until after we have sent a messenger. So this is the angle that the day of judgment, when Allah will judge and will reward or punish, then that cannot take place until after iqamatul hujjah. And iqamatul hujjah can only be by way of the sending of the messengers and the books. Wal hujjah innama qamat bi rusulihi wa kutubihi wa bihim ustuhiqqa al-thawab wal iqab. It is through the books and messengers that punishment and reward becomes justified. And through them will the day of judgment be established. And wasiq al-abrar ila al-na'im wal-fujjar ila al-jahim. So the righteous will be driven to reward and bliss, and the sinful will be driven towards the hellfire. So this is the fourth angle now, establishing the sending of prophethood as a necessity. The fifth angle, or the fifth place in Al-Fātiḥah, is from the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, Iyāka na'bud, Iyāka na'bud. So he says, فَإِنَّمَا يُعْبَدُ بِهِ الرَّبُّ تَعَالَى لَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا عَلَى مَا يُحِبُّهُ وَيَرْضَاهُ وَعِبَادَتُهُ هِيَ شُكْرُهُ وَحُسْنُهُ فِطْرِي مَعْقُولٌ لِلْعُقُولِ السَّلِيمَةِ لكن طريق التعبد وما يعبد به لا سبيل إلى معرفته إلا برسله. So he says, when we say إياك نعبد, then that by which Allah is worshipped cannot be except through what He loves and is pleased with. And since worship is being grateful to Him, and it is something that the fitrah and the aql is naturally inclined to, so we're already inclined to it, but the path to it can only be known by way of His messengers. وفي هذا بيان أن إرسال الرسل أمر مستقر في العقول. So this now is a proof to show that even in the intellect, this now is an intellectual proof as well, meaning the point being that since in the fitrah and the aql, a person is already inclined to want to worship his Lord and to be grateful to his Lord, then because of that, in the aql, it is established thereby that the sending of messengers is a necessity. Right? So, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, we are stating, you alone do we worship. Worship is fitri, daruri, that we are inclined towards worship. We want to be grateful because we experience the favors, and we know it's the rational, it's the correct thing to do. Reason tells us this is the thing to do. And so therefore, from the aql, the sending of messengers is thereby necessitated. So then he says, وَفِي هَذَا بَيَانْ أَنَّ إِرْسَالَ الرُّسُلِ أَمْرٌ مُسْتَقِرٌ فِي الْعُقُولِ. This is a refutation, as we said, of the deists. Right? It is ingrained in the reason that the sending of messengers is a necessity. Right? Reason tells you that this is a necessity. This is a refutation of the deists. So he says, so he continues and he says, يستحيل تعطيل العالم عنه كما يستحيل تعطيله عن الصانع. So he says, it is impossible that the world can be stripped or removed from having prophets and messengers in the same way that the creation, it's impossible to have the creation stripped of a creator. Right? So just like it's impossible that, we can't strip the creation, we can't say that the creation has no creator, which means stripping the creation of its creator. In the same way, it is impossible to strip the creation from its messengers. Both of these things are the same. It's impossible. Then he goes on to say, فَمَنْ أَنْكَرَ الرَّسُولِ فَقَدْ أَنْكَرَ الْمُرْسِلِ وَلَمْ يُؤْمِنْ بِهِ وَلِهَذَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ الْكُفْرَ بِرَسُولِهِ كُفْرًا بِهِ. So he said, whoever denies the messenger, he has denied the sender of the messenger and has not believed in him. And this is why whoever Allah made the one who disbelieved in his messenger to be a disbeliever in Allah. Right? That's why those who negate and deny the messengers in general, the prophets in general, or deny the messenger Muhammad, he is a denier. He does not believe in Allah. He doesn't believe in Allah. Because disbelieving in the Rasul is disbelieving in the Mursil, the one who sent him. Anyhow, this is the fifth angle, or the fifth reason, fifth evidence. The sixth place in Al-Fātiḥah, which indicates the sending of messengers, من قوله اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, guide us to the straight path. So then he goes on to explain al-hidayah. He goes on to explain the two types of al-hidayah that you're familiar with. هي البيان والدلالة ثم التوفيق والإلهام. So guidance is either explaining the truth and pointing out the truth, al-bayan wal-dilala, ثم التوفيق والإلهام. And then after that, it is Allah granting success and, inspiring you as to your guidance. And this only comes after the first one, after the path has been made clear by explanation and elucidation. And then he says, وَلَا سَبِيلَ إِلَى الْبَيَانِ وَالدِّلَالَةِ إِلَّا مِنْ جِهَةِ الرُّسُلِ. And obviously there is no way to get the explanation and the elucidation of the path that we are seeking guidance to, except by way of the messengers. So therefore, once we acquire this knowledge of this path and elucidation of the path, then there results from it the second type of guidance, which is the guidance of tawfiq, which is when Allah gives you success in acting upon the path. Not just knowing the path, but acting upon the path as well. So he puts Iman in the heart, and then he makes Iman beloved to the heart, and then he beautifies it in the heart, and then he makes that to have an effect upon that person, so that he's pleased with it, and then he aspires to that worship. So, in other words, in Al-Fātiḥah, there are two types of guidance that are being alluded to when we say Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim. There is the first type of guidance, which is just to have the path explained to us. Right? This is haqq, this is batil, this is huda, this is dalal, this is halal, this is haram, this is wajib, this is, all these things, this is elucidation of the path. Right? This is the affairs of the unseen, this is paradise, this is hellfire, this is elucidation of the path. And then the second part is now it being put in your heart, and that you aspiring to want to follow the path and actually acting upon that. This now is the second level of guidance. And both of these are included when we say Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim. So, of these two types of guidance, which of the two is the evidence for the messengers? The first or the second one? It's got to be the first one, because the second one is only from Allah. Second one is Allah only gives guidance to the hearts. The first one is what the messengers do, because they make bayan and they make explanation of the path. So he says these two types of guidance mas'ulatan, these are the two guidances which are asked, and success cannot be attained except by way of them both. And these types of guidance, he then goes on to make a point. I'll quickly summarize it. Basically, he says that if we are already guided, if we are already on the path, we are Muslim, we are people of Tawheed, we are people of the Sunnah, then how can someone say, Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim, if you're already on the path? And Ibn al-Qayyim answers this by saying that, this question is false. إِذَا كُنَّا مُحْتَدِينَ فَكَيْفَ نَسْأَلُ الْهِدَايَةَ. If we are already guided, how can we ask for guidance? He then explains why we need to ask for guidance. So he says, فَإِنَّ الْمَجْهُولَ لَنَا مِنَ الْحَقِّ أَدْعَافُ الْمَعْدُومِ أَدْعَافُ الْمَعْلُومِ. He says, indeed, that which we do not know of the truth is multiple times more that which we do know. Right? So if you ask yourself, from all of the ilm that Allah revealed and all of the sciences, how much of that do I actually have knowledge of? And you'll find that it's a tiny fraction, a tiny amount compared to what you don't know. Right? So straight away, you are missing a huge part of the guidance of al-bayan wad-dilala. You're missing that straight away, right? So now that part that you do have, the part that you do have knowledge of, that you have knowledge of. He says, وَمَا لَا نُرِيدُ فِعْلَهُ تَحَاوُنًا وَكَسْلًا مِثْلُ مَا نُرِيدُهُ أَوْ أَكْثَرْ مِنْهُ أَوْ دُونَهُ. So then he says, so if you take that bit of knowledge which you do have, which is only a fraction of the sum whole of knowledge of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then from that knowledge, how much of it do you actually have the desire to act upon? Right? And that you don't act upon out of laziness or neglect. Like, what's the ratio? Is it half-half? So half of the knowledge that you actually have, you have the desire to act upon it? Or is it less than that, right? So each person answer himself. Like, of all the knowledge you hold in your head, on your heart or your head, of all the things that you know, of the halal and the haram and the, that which is mustahab, that which is wajib, of all of the acts of the ibadat and all of the mu'amalat, things that you actually know, you have knowledge of, that this is what Allah desires and pleases Him. And how much of that do you actually have the irada to actually act upon? Is it half of it? Is it most of it? Is it the small part of it? Each person knows his own reality, right? So meaning this is just having the irada to act upon what you actually know, right? So from all of knowledge, you have a tiny fraction. From that fraction of knowledge, how much of it do you actually have the irada to act upon in the first place, right? So that will be, let's say, another fraction, right? Another fraction. So of all the knowledge, you only have the irada to act upon just a fraction of that. Then, from that small fraction, he says, وَمَا لَا نَقْدِرُ عَلَيْهِ مِمَّا نُرِيدُهُ كَذَلِكَ. So, it doesn't mean that just because we have the irada to act upon that fraction of knowledge that we have, that we actually have the qudra to do so, the ability to do so, right? And sometimes, you sit there and you think, I want to do this, I want to pray nawafil, I want to do umrah, I want to give charity. Like, this irada comes and enters into the mind and heart of a person. But do you actually have the qudra to do so? Do you have the ability or the means to do so? Maybe not. So now when we look at the issue of qudra, we find that now is another fraction of that fraction of the other fraction. And then he says, وَمَا نَعْرِفُ جُمْلَتَهُ وَلَا نَحْتَدِي لِتَفَاصِيلِهِ فَأَمْرٌ يَفُوتُ الْحَسَرِ. Right, so now there's other affairs, like maybe some things we know in general, but we don't know all the details. So now we are in need of the details of that issue. Right? It could be a matter of belief, it could be a matter of the rulings, it could be something that we know general things, but we don't know all the specific details. Take, for example, wudu or prayer, for example. There are many details of the prayer that many people don't know. So we need to have those tafasil. So he says, فَأَمْرٌ يَفُوتُ الْحَسَرِ. So meaning that if we think of it in this way, then it's not possible to comprehend this affair. وَنَحْنُ مُحْتَاجُونَ إِلَى الْهِدَايَةِ التَّامَّةِ فَمَنْ كَمَلَتْ لَهُ هَذِهِ الْأُمُورِ كَانَ سُؤَالُ الْهِدَايَةِ لَهُ سُؤَالُ التَّثْبِيتِ وَالدَّوَامِ. So for most people, they are in need of perfect guidance. And if there's anyone who has perfected these affairs, then when he asks for hidayah, then hidayah is from the angle of tathbeet, keeping me firm upon the truth and upon the truth. Now we'll finish, inshallah ta'ala. Right, so far, what is Ibn al-Qayyim mentioned? There are two levels of guidance, right? What is the first level? Al-Bayan wa Dilala. Right, this is the evidence for the sending of messengers, that we need elucidation of the path. Right, the second part of it is actual guidance in acting upon the path. We are in need of guidance of both these things. Why? Because we don't know all the truth, firstly. And secondly, we don't have the irada to act upon what we know. And if we do, we don't have the qudra to act upon it, even though we have the irada. So in al-Bayan wa Dilala, we need guidance from Allah to fill the details and the gaps in our knowledge. And in this, we need guidance from Allah to give us tawfiq, to actually have the irada to act in the first place for the knowledge that we have, and then to have the qudra as well. Right? But then there's a third level of guidance. There's another type of guidance that mankind is in need of. And this is also, like indirectly, this is also evidence for the messengers in a way. But he goes on to explain, وَلِلْحِدَايَةِ مَرْتَبَةٌ أُخْرَى وَهِيَ آخِرُ مَرَاتِبِهَا. Guidance has yet another level, and it is the last of its levels. وَهِيَ الْحِدَايَةِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ إِلَى طَرِيقِ الْجَنَّةِ وَهُوَ الصِّرَاطُ الْمُوصِلُ إِلَيْهَا. He says this guidance is the guidance on the Day of Judgment to the path, or on the path of paradise. And it is the path that leads to paradise. فَمَنْ هُدِيَ فِي هَذِهِ الدَّارِ إِلَى صِرَاطِ اللَّهِ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ الَّذِي أَرْسَلَ بِهِ رَسُولَهُ وَأَنزَلَ بِهِ كِتَابَهُ هُدِيَ هُنَاكَ إِلَى الصِّرَاطِ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ الْمُوصِلِ إِلَى جَنَّتِهِ وَدَارِ ثَوَابِهِ. Now look at how he connects the two types of guidance. He says, whoever is guided in the life of this world to the straight path of Allah, the one with which He sent His messengers and the one with which He revealed His books, he will be guided to that straight path which leads to his paradise and the abode of reward. And وَعَلَى قَدْرِ ثُبُوتِ قَدَمِهِ عَلَى هَذَا الصِّرَاطِ الَّذِي نَسَبَهُ اللَّهُ لِعِبَادِهِ فِي هَذِهِ الدَّارِ يكون ثبوت قدمه على الصراط المنسوب على متن جهنم. So he says, to the extent that a servant, his foot is firm upon this path which Allah has fixed for His servants in this world, to that same extent will be his feet or his foot on that path which is being fixed over the middle of hellfire. Right? So meaning, in other words, that you have an idea of how you will pass over the sirat, over hellfire, by analogizing for it, by looking in the life of this world, how are you on the path of Allah in the life of this world? It's like for like. So as you are on the path in the life of this world, in terms of ilm and amal, as we said, then that will be exactly the same as to what manner you will pass over that bridge, pass over the sirat, which is over hellfire in that life. Then he says, فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَمُرُّ كَالْبَرْقِ. So therefore there will be some from the believers who will pass over that bridge, over hellfire, like the lightning, like a flash of lightning. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَمُرُّ كَالطَّرْفِ. And then among them who will pass like the blinking of an eye, right? Blinking of an eye. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَمُرُّ كَالرِّيحِ. And amongst them are those who will traverse it like the swift wind. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَمُرُّ كَشَدِّ الرِّكَابِ. Then some of them will traverse it like the speedy horseman, the really fast, horse. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَسْعَى سَعْيًا. Then there will be those who will be running swiftly. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَمُرُّ مَشْيًا. Those who will be simply walking. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَحْبُو حَبْوًا. And amongst them will those who will be crawling. وَمِنْهُمُ الْمَخْدُوشِ الْمُسَلَّمِ. And amongst them are those who, as he's going over, he's being lacerated and by the hooks and things like this, but he will actually be saved. Right? So as he moves, he's being, with the hooks and everything, but he will eventually be saved at the end of it. وَمِنْهُمْ الْمُقَرْضَسِ فِي النَّارِ. Al-Muqardas, and amongst them is the one, Al-Muqardas is like, this is like the person where you grab his two hands and you grab his two legs together like this and you go like this. Right? This is Al-Muqardas. So among them is the one who will be taken and he will be thrown in the hellfire like that. Right? So now this is the third level of guidance. So depending on your guidance in the life of this world and how you traverse the path, it will be like for like how you traverse on that path. Now, he goes on to say, and we finish in a few minutes inshallah, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْعَبْدِ سَيْرَهُ عَلَى ذَاكَ الصِّرَاطِ مِنْ سَيْرِهِ عَلى هَذَا حَذْوَ الْقُذَّةِ بِالْقُذَّةِ. So he says, let the servant look at him traversing over that path in light of him traversing on this path, in this life. Take it like for like. Jaza'an wifaqa, a befitting recompense. And then he says, هَلْ تُجْزَوْنَ إِلَّا مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. Will you be recompensed except by that which you used to do? And then he says, وَلْيَنْظُرِ الشَّهَوَاتِ وَالشُّبُهَاتِ الَّتِي تُعَوِّقُهُ عَنْ سَيْرِهِ عَلَى هَذَا الصِّرَاطِ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ فإنها الكلاليب التي بجنبتي ذاك الصراط. So he says, so now let a servant look at the shubuhat and the shahawat, which divert him from the straight path in this life. Right? So in this life, what do we have that divert you from the path? It's the shubuhat, it is the doubts, the misconceptions, like in creed and belief. And so meaning, what is with the kuffar of the doubts, what is with the mubtadi'ah, right, of the firq, what they have of the doubts. These are the shubuhat. And likewise, on the other side, there is the shahawat, the desires, the lusts, right? These are the two things that are pulling you this way and that way. In the hereafter, these two things become what? They become al-kalalib. These are the hooks on either side of the sirat across the hellfire. So he says, they will snatch him and they will turn him away from passing over the path. And so if they are strong and plentiful in this life, meaning that you are subject to shubuhat and shahawat and your life is plagued with these things, then in the hereafter they will be likewise for you. So when you pass over the path, if you had a shubha in this life, shubha in belief, in creed, in iman, in qadr, in sifat, about the sahaba, about the ulama, about whatever it might be, they will be waiting for you hooks to the equivalent of your shubuhat. And if you have shahawat, lusts and desires that you followed, then there will be hooks likewise, like for like, waiting for you to snatch you, to lacerate you, to pull you off in the bridge over hellfire. وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ. And so never is your Lord is never oppressive or unjust to his servants. فَسُؤَالُ الْحِدَايَةِ مُتَضَمِّنٌ لِحُصُولِ كُلِّ خَيْرٍ وَالسَّلَامَةِ مِنْ كُلِّ شَرٍ. So now we can understand why it is that we say اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Right? We are asking basically for every good and safety from every evil. So this is number 6. I'll quickly mention number 7, al-mawdi' as-sabi'. So number 6 was when we say ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, we are asking guidance to the path. The messengers come, they elucidate, they explain the path, and there's no way for us to know that except by way of the messengers. This is a proof for the prophethood and messengership. The 7th is min ma'rifati nafsil mas'ul. right? Which is وَهُوَ الصِّرَاطُ الْمُسْتَقِيمُ, right? Just knowledge of the path itself, the very thing we are asking for. We are asking for the straight path. And we know that the straight path, he says, وَلَا تَكُونَ الطَّرِيقُ صِرَاطًا حَتَّى تَتَدَمَّنْ خَمْسَةَ أُمُورٍ. No path can be straight unless it has 5 things. It has al-istiqamah. It has to be straight like this. Secondly, wal-isal ila al-maqsood. It has to make you reach the destination, right? So if a path is straight, it necessitates it's going to lead you to the destination. Wal-qurb, right? So if the path is straight, then this is the closest route to where you want to get to. So that's why the path being straight necessitates the next 2. The path is straight, which means it will get you to the destination, and it's the closest it can ever be because it's straight directly to the destination. وَسَعَتُهُ لِلْمَارِينَ عَلَيْهِ. It has to be vast and broad enough for all the people to pass over it, right? And the straight path of Allah is open for everybody. And وَتَعِيُّنُهُ طَرِيقًا لِلْمَقْصُودِ. It has to be designated as the path that leads you to the destination. And that is found in Al-Fātiḥah. Why? Because Allah Azza wa Jal said, صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Right? So then he clarified the path, that this is the path that leads you, not the path of the astray, not the path of those upon whom is Allah's wrath. So all of these descriptions are found for this straight path of Allah. This is indirectly a proof for the prophethood and the messengership. I think, inshallah, we can probably stop at that point. Inshallah ta'ala. We'll leave the last one, number 8, for the next time that we meet, inshallah ta'ala. So just to conclude then today, we looked at the Muqaddimah of Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah. In the Muqaddimah, he made it clear what the objective of his book is, of his writing is. It is to extract from Al-Fātiḥah all of the lofty pursuits, lofty objectives that a servant pursues in the life of this world in terms of knowledge, to extract them from Al-Fātiḥah and to lay down the foundations of all the things that will come after, by way of which we can be travelers on the path to Allah in the right way, right? So we know what is meant by al-haqiqah. It is to have knowledge of Allah, of His names, of His attributes, of His actions in the right way, upon the way of the Salaf. It is to know the tariqah, right? The actual way that we reach Allah, not the way of the Sufis. And it is al-dhawq. How do we get intuition? There is intuition, like as we will see later. There are ways in which Allah directs you and guides your intuition to that which is correct. But is it like in the way of the Sufis? Or is there something else by which you can develop this intuition of always being guided to that which is correct? And there is. It is being truthful, having sidq. We shall look at this inshallah later. Right? So this is al-dhawq. And likewise al-mawajid, like meaning because obviously people of the truth have to feel pleasure from the worship that they do. And they have to feel ecstasy. And they have to feel, these things inside from the sound, valid types of worship that they perform upon a way other than the way of the Sufis. Because what the Sufis fall into, this is, the shayateen enter upon them, and it's just like a type of ecstasy, it's like a type of ishq, it's like a type of love which is a tainted, corrupted, exaggerated type of love. Now we don't want that. We want the pure type of pleasure and ecstasy which is within the limits and the bounds of what is acceptable within the Sharia, other than what the Sufis claim and what they fall into. So he made that clear that this is the objective of the book in the Muqaddimah. Then we started looking at the lofty objectives taken from Al-Fātiḥah. And so this is just the start. There are many, many things, as we said, in the pages that proceed. So inshallah, we'll stop there for today, and we'll continue the next time Allah allows us to gather together again. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.